Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Fridays with Keenan's Cutting Edge, where we discuss all things edge. My name is Jenna Labor, and I will be your host as we explore the dynamic world of Don Keenan's trial philosophy, The Cutting Edge. Now, this episode is airing on December 24th, which, for those of you who celebrate, is Christmas Eve, which means, number one, I'm wearing a festive, ugly Christmas sweater for all of your viewing pleasure. And number two, this episode is pre-recorded, so you will not have the opportunity to ask our speaker live questions. Please don't leave, though, because it's going to be a great episode, and we will post his contact information in the description below so that you can contact him with any questions you have after the episode. And as usual, the episode will be released on Monday across all of our platforms, so be sure to hit that subscribe button and click the alerts icon to make sure you don't miss an episode. Today, we have again with us Gregg Luther. He is back to discuss obstetrical malpractice. You know, as I mentioned last week, this topic is near and dear to Papa Don's heart, and Gregg was handpicked to speak with us about it. When we have the opportunity to protect the most vulnerable of our population, I hope we all jump at it. And I am excited to hear some tips and tricks to ensure we are doing justice by these little ones. So, Gregg, tell us about obstetrical malpractice.
Absolutely. And Merry Christmas to you, Jenna.
Thank you.
Hey, before we get rolling, I want to give a shout out to the guys that make this possible. There's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes, a lot of time and faces that don't get seen. But I want to give a shout out to Ryan and Chase. You guys wave. They're in the control room. That's actually the Keenan Law Firm office in Santa Rosa Beach. And they make all this happen. They do a lot of hard work. Thank you guys for your time, and Merry Christmas to you both. So obstetrical malpractice, kind of a hot topic. And you're going to be surprised why. The Supreme Court just heard oral arguments in the case with the I won't say the state's name, but you know what it is. The state law that basically overturns Roe v. Wade. The Supreme Court heard arguments in it, and a lot of people, at least the talking heads on the TV, are talking about it. So that emotion, that stance, that belief that everybody has is at the forefront of their mind. It has come to the surface. Everybody has a feeling one way or another about the life of a little baby. And that's the key thing for the people that are anti-abortion, is it's about the life of a little baby. Now, that's what an obstetrical case is about. It's about the life of the little baby. You know, that's what hangs in the balance when a mom-to-be goes to see her doctor. That's the most important thing on that mom's mind for 9 months or longer. She reads the right books. She eats the right food. She does the right exercises. She goes to the doctor's office and subjects herself to all kinds of, almost, personal violations, if not for in the context of, a mom to be. And then goes to the hospital and subjects herself to the same sorts of things. So you can just imagine the emotion that is bottled up in everybody when it comes to pregnancy, to birth and to a newborn baby. The one thing every mom-to-be wants when they start out this long journey is a healthy baby. The goal at the end is a healthy baby and willing to do anything to get one. Never, never, ever should mama or will mama jeopardize the life of the little baby growing inside her. So in the malpractice case where we have a pregnancy, nobody has the right to hurt the little baby. Everybody should be on board to protect them. And that's the overarching principle of these cases that strikes, every one of us. Even if you don't have kids, you were once a baby, even if you don't have kids, you have parents, you have family members. So, it's something that everybody in one way or another has gone through. So everybody's connected to it. We're all connected to it. So take a step back and look at, what happens when something is done wrong. That's where tort law steps in. If you remember back to those of you who are watching who went to law school, most of you probably are. I can't imagine anybody taking time to watch this. If you don't try malpractice cases and if you didn't go to law school. But anyway, you remember back to law school, you learned that tort law, picked up where criminal law left off. When the criminal law ended, these set of strict rules that everybody has to adhere to, you then start the tort law. And rather than these strict, rigid, thou shall not type laws, you got the reasonable person standard. And it's a reasonable person standard is going to be what? Be careful. And the opposite of careful is careless. And the tort law, the reasonable person has to be careful not to hurt other people. Think back to Paul's graph. What did Justice Cardozo say in Paul's graph, that case you learned about in law school? But it was the concept of the foreseeability of harm from the act, right? And it was that foreseeability of harm that made the act wrongful, made it a tort. He said, I think it was something like the act is wrongful because the eye of vigilance perceives danger. We don't talk like that anymore. Maybe he never talked like that. He probably did, though. Anyway, now, that evolved into the foreseeability of harm. But the act, you should think before you act, right? We say that, don't we? Didn't our parents teach us that? Think before you act. Well, think before you act. Think, what am I about to do? Who could be hurt and how bad? And then maybe I should do it more carefully. So, it's being careful. It's the safety of others that tort law is all about. And if you're going to talk about being careful and the safety of others, Jenna said it at the beginning, are most vulnerable. Who's most vulnerable? A baby growing inside a mom, and the mom's vulnerable because she's looking to the doctor to make the right decisions, do the right things, protect her, prevent bad things from happening. So it ties directly in to tort law, maybe more so than any other case, But think about, I realize as I'm sitting here with the December sun creeping over in the afternoon, it is now taking up the whole screen. So Ryan, if I need to move, you let me know. I'll try and do what I can. Anyway, so let's say, let's just take normal life, things that we all do. Jenna tells me, hey, I'm going to go hiking. What do I say? When she leaves, I probably say, be careful, right? Hey, I'm going to go swimming. See ya. Okay. Be careful. It's in our human nature to be careful. We expect everybody to be careful for themselves, look out for themselves, and look out for each other. That's just the way we are. And that's what tort law is. Tort reform distorted that. It was a lie, is a lie that is told by liars, that tort law is something, bad and evil. But what tort law is that it's a set of reasonable standards that make sure everybody is careful so that innocent people don't get hurt. Okay, so now let's move forward to and you got to keep that in mind in the obstetric case, in any case, especially in obstetric though, but keep in mind where these deep-seated emotions come from. Why does anybody care about, the care that somebody else's, unborn baby gets? Why? Because, we want there to be a standardized, uniform level of care. We want everybody to be careful. It's that plain and simple, but keep that in mind. That's what the law says. Paul's graph, the, tort law, be careful. Act like a reasonable person would act. Be as careful as a reasonable doctor would be, a reasonably careful doctor, or a reasonably careful hospital or nurse. Care, be careful. So couple that then with the emotion of, it's been described as probably the greatest joy in life, a newborn baby. So look at the obstetrics case and think, go back to Cardozo's opinion in Paul's graph. What did he say? The act is wrongful because, the eye of vigilance perceives danger. So ask yourself, in the case that comes into your office, parents come in, maybe just mom comes in, who knows, did everything right, went to every prenatal visit, took all those icky vitamins, ate all the crappy food, did everything, went on bed rest, whatever, followed all the rules, did everything that was said, told to be done. Every visit reassured by the healthcare professionals, baby's doing fine, baby's doing fine, baby's doing fine, baby's doing fine. 9 months of baby's doing fine. Everything looks good. Keep doing this. Be more careful about this, right? These people come to your office at the time of delivery, everything was great up until then, or maybe shortly before, and then tragedy struck. And that's, that's a tall order to represent those people. Not just the mom and dad, but the little baby who is going to have lifelong, devastating injuries from this. So that's what you're getting into in a malpractice case. You take it seriously. Now, the judge and the defense lawyers really won't, with some exceptions, but they won't take it as seriously as you should. And you just have to learn to ignore them. They're just noise. This is a tall order. You have to be careful as their lawyer. So ask yourself when you're reviewing the case, what about the defendant's conduct would make it to where, the eye of vigilance would perceive danger? What about the defendant's conduct would put somebody else in danger? And don't go to the medicine. Don't get involved. Medicine is a set of loosey-goosey standards that they keep moving. They keep researching the science. It's not the medicine that's the act. It's the doctor not listening to the nurse who calls 3 times to say, hey, I'm concerned about this pattern on the strip. By the way, a normal person doesn't know what that means anyway. It's only after you've lived in the realm of doctor talk and hospital talk and read a bunch of medical books and medical journals that you start to understand that stuff. But that's not how we should talk anyway. But it's the doctor not listening to the nurse who is there, eyes on the patient, is concerned. Doctor doesn't come in and check on things. Doctor doesn't give new orders. So what do you have? You have someone who's in a position of power, who's disregarding a subordinate's warning. That's what you have. Somebody who's not listening, thinks they're more important or better, whatever, no more than the messenger who's given them the warning. So somebody's not listening to warnings. That right there is how, that's what Justice Cardozo's talking about. That's a point where the doctor's not listening to the subordinate who's giving a warning, demonstrates, the eye of vigilance perceiving danger. Maybe something doesn't happen bad every time, but it could. You could foresee that it could. Take the game. Take the Russian roulette. It's not going to. The bullet's not going to go off every time. And then you get into the statistics of how often it will happen. But the thing is the risk being taken shouldn't, the eye of vigilance should not do that. The careful person should not do that, would see that that's dangerous, and you just don't take those kinds of risks. I mean, one of the overarching truths about medicine that everybody agrees on, even doctors agree, is that, hospitals and doctors can never gamble with the patient's life. Can never gamble with the patient's life. So back up to the doctor not listening to the nurse who's voicing concern, giving a warning. What is that? That's gambling with the patient's life. Not just mama. I'm talking about the unborn baby. So the defendant's wrongful conduct how can that harm random victims in other ways? You could just think of the ways. The pilot not listening to the airline mechanic or the flight attendant. The police chief not listening to reports from officers on the street of bad things that are going on. Whatever, you can always find things in the current events of what's going on in our country that show these same sorts of things. It's not being careful. It's not what reasonably careful people do. So that leads you to, and as an exercise, sit down and write those things out. Sit down and write out how the defendant's conduct here could harm people. How it could foreseeably harm innocent people. And then ask yourself, why should anybody care? If you're going to take on this case and these clients, you need to know why a jury would care. Why should you care? Why should your experts care? Why should the strangers who come to the courthouse to decide your case care? Because if you cannot answer that question, you shouldn't take the case. What's going to make them care? It's usually tied to, and make a list of that. Make a list of those things about what's going to make them care. Why? Because that's how you demonstrate how a reasonably careful doctor would act. A reasonably careful police officer would act. A reasonably careful air traffic controller would act. What is it about the wrongful act that would make somebody else care about it? Expect the actor to be careful there. Be more careful than what the bad guy was in your case, basically. And then, to extend it further and to just give example, you think of those things like, for instance, the hospital. Maybe, did the hospital have the chain of command policy? Did they train on that? Did the nurse follow it? Or did the nurse just document several times in the records that the doctor did not give any new orders and did not come to see the mama? Well, if a nurse is charting that stuff, it's because they know the doctor's not being careful. If they know the doctor's not being careful, they take the chain of command policy, they know the doctor's not being careful. The patient this is the doctor gambling with the patient's life and baby's life. That's an instance where the chain of command policy should have been activated. What's the chain of command? The nurse starts calling people in charge, goes over the doctor's head. Hey, mama is at risk, or baby's at risk, or both are at risk, and something needs to be done here. And maybe it's nothing, but the nurse should be celebrated for doing that. In the ideal world, the nurse should be celebrated for doing that, for making sure that something bad that could have been prevented, a vulnerable patient, mama, baby, who needed protection, was there for protection. Right? The only reason we go to the doctor is for protection. I guess, unless you want to say also prevention, right? You get symptoms of something bad happening, you go to the doctor and start to find out what's wrong. Or you just, maybe you're going for prevention reasons, but whatever it is, I think in an obstetrical case, we're talking both protection and prevention. That's why we're going, I can't say we're, because us guys, we don't have to do the hard work, but that's why all the moms are going to the doctor for the prenatal visits and doing, what the doctor and what the hospital, what the nurses say. Uh, so anyway, take a look at the other systems, the analogous systems to this healthcare provider relationship that a patient has. What do you expect? Why is it important for FAA to watch over the conduct of air traffic controllers? Why don't they just turn loose and let them go? Hey, do your best, Well, those air traffic controllers have to be qualified. Why? Because, they're a life or death thing, just like, healthcare. It's a life or death thing. There's a lot of people on those planes, and when they go down, we all know it is terrible, devastating. So it's a life or death thing. They need to be not only qualified, they need to be trained, and they need to be supervised. And so there's a good example that everybody understands of that's another system where if the governing body is not ensuring you've got qualified, trained, super positions, something bad can and probably will happen. It's just a matter of when, which is the cases that come in our office, they're the when. They're the air traffic controller might have gotten by with being sloppy before and nothing bad happened. You can run a stop sign and nobody gets hurt. But if you start to make running a stop sign your regular conduct, you're not being careful. You're being careless. And eventually, something bad's going to happen. It's predictable. That stop sign is there to protect you and all the other drivers. It's there to prevent, the devastation that can happen. We've all seen that in a car wreck. So same thing applies to healthcare. The hospital needs to make sure that the doctor, listen, hospitals are, they're the governing body, and the Joint Commission who makes the rules for them says so. Medicare says so. They're the governing body. They decide who gets in, right? They decide what patients get in. Do you have health insurance, right? They decide what doctors get privileges there. They decide, what third-party vendors get to work there. They decide what staff gets to work there, nurses and techs and all different kind of degreed and trained people. They decide, they look at those qualifications. Are you qualified? And then, do you have the right training? And in some cases, they need to train. And in all cases, they need to supervise. They need to have oversight. Let's take the analogous systems and let's run the training. Let's run the training on it, okay? So, police department, right? As a whole, the problem starts at the top, right? It's not, few bad apples will spoil the whole bushel, but the job of the governing body, the police department, is to, get rid of those bad apples. The job of the hospital board, the governing body of the hospital, is to get rid of the bad apples, if any, in their hospital. And how do you do that? You got to watch what they do. You got to make sure they're trained. But let's use training. I started down that road. You can think, my brain goes in a million different ways thinking of all the examples, but let's use the training, analogous system training in a police department. The cops, and I won't give the names. We all know the names. We know the names of the victims more than we do the names of the bad guy cops. But they're all on the tips of our tongues. And what was it that led to us knowing that victim's name? It was a cop, or maybe a group of cops, who didn't know how to do the right thing when it mattered, in the blink of an eye. Just like, healthcare is the same way. There's not, a ton of time to, call back to headquarters and say, hey, we got this situation. What do we do? There's not that opportunity. So that makes training so critical, because everybody has to know what to do in the blink of an eye, right there when it matters. If the decision isn't made in time, if they don't know what to do at the right time, they could do the wrong thing, which is why we know the names of those victims of those bad cops. They weren't trained correctly. It's a combination of one or two things. They weren't trained correctly, or they weren't supervised to make sure that they did do the right thing at the right time, or knew what to do. It was, either bad or lack of training, or they were just bad apples. And in spite of all the good training, they weren't going to do the right thing. So what do we see in those kind of cases? Well, when they start looking into that cop, and guess what? He's got a history, right? Back 3 years ago, he did this bad thing. Then 2 years ago, he did this bad thing. And then 6 months ago, he did this bad thing, right? Those bad things, maybe nobody got hurt, right? Maybe nobody died, but it could have happened. Again, with somebody else's life. We aren't going to let our police departments do it, and they're dealing with, somebody that's usually on the wrong side of the law, Well, then take that same expectation and look at it with a little unborn baby who's not doing anything to anybody. How much more important is it? How much more careless is it to not have the right training, for the hospital to not be having oversight to make sure that their staff has the right training, or is following the rules if they think they're too important to follow rules. We're all in favor of hospitals saying, you know what, Dr. Rainmaker, get out of here, because you're doing things that are dangerous to mamas to be and unborn babies, and we don't care how much money you make this hospital. You're not following the rules. You've shown a pattern. We've been watching you. Leave. Is there anybody among us, or anybody amongst our family members, who maybe think differently than we do, or our friends that think differently than we do? Is there anybody? Can you think of anybody who would say, no, the hospital should never do that? No, the police department should never fire that cop. No, we all agree with that. So, draw back to the root of those things. We expect the governing body, whatever it is, to hire qualified people, right? How you do that? You vet, you screen, you get verification, and then train. Verify training if they don't need any, or have them go through some tasks to make sure they can do them, or give them the training they need. And why is training important? Remember, because it's important because in these situations, the training has to be there in a blink of an eye, snap of a finger. It has to be right. There's not time. If the precious time is wasted, if too much time goes by, it's too late. You have to do the right thing at the right time. And in order to do that, you have to know how to do the right thing at the right time when it matters. So training's a big deal, as is supervision, oversight. We expect that. What do you say? Your friend says, I'm going to have my gallbladder out. What do you say? Where? Why do you ask where? Because they say, I'm going to Death Valley Regional. And you go, oh my God, so many bad things happen there. Right? We all do it. You want your friend, you tell your friend, oh, you should go to, whatever the name of the hospital is in your local area that's got the good reputation. Why? Because they just had the reputation of doing the right thing. Now, you got to watch that because hospitals spend a lot of money in advertising to keep up their image. So, that's an issue also. Well, I've found in focus groups where people will say, oh, that's a great hospital. And I know of, 10 people they killed last year, preventably. So, be aware of that. But getting back to the point, we ask why, where they're going rather, because we want to know that they're going to the right place. So we care about where they're going because we want them to go to the safe hospital. We want them to go to the hospital that trains. The staff there are trained. They're all nice. They're all wonderful. They all know how to do the right thing at the right time. They all listen. They all, and the hospital supervises all of them so that you know that it's safe to go there. So some of you are going to know the exercise we just ran. Some of you outsiders, maybe you defense lawyers or DRI people that are watching this hoping to learn something. We just told a little secret that, you're going to have to figure out. So good luck. So that's the first exercise, to start with, looking at a case, deciding how you're going to work it up. What are the important key points? The defendant's conduct. What about the hospital's action? The act of the hospital or failure to act of the hospital would cause the eye of vigilance to perceive danger. Why would anybody else care about that? What are the other analogous systems where this is also important? Because it's great to teach by example. And one of the best examples that everybody keys into with a hospital is a police department. And sadly, they have been in the news all too much for lack of qualifications, lack of training, lack of supervision, or a bad apple at the top. Bad motivations. So what do you do? Let's go back to the example of, the doctor not listening to the nurse who's calling with concerns about the the baby's heartbeat, the fetal heart strip, they call it, which, by the way, don't ever call it that in trial or in deposition. It's important. Med-mal, it's critically important in medical malpractice cases more than, anywhere. It's important in every case, but man, that sun is going to take me out of the picture. May have to move over to the other side of the room. It's important in a medical malpractice case. I kind of have an aura, Jenna.
Looking quite holy, actually.
Oh, yeah. I'll probably get struck by lightning here in a second. I can't get it to go away. There we go. Okay.
There you go.
I'll be sitting out here on the edge of the chair soon. So we want to have all these medical terms defined in plain English. And we use the plain English. That's not the fetal heart monitor strip. That's the printout of the baby's heartbeat. It's the record of the baby's heartbeat. And we're not talking decelerations and minimal variability and some foreign language that, our jurors don't know. And to be honest, we don't really know it. And if you want to keep digging deeper, you can find all kinds of studies where doctors and nurses look at the same strip and they all say it says something different, but what are the important things? Why do you keep track of a baby's heartbeat? Why do you keep track of your own heartbeat? Why? Because there's a range where you want it to be, right? There's the low end and the high end of the safe range. And we've all seen, the pattern. We know we want it to look uniform. You don't want it going crazy. And then, so we know the tracing, the way the heart beats, the electricity has to look uniform. So talk about, the safe zone of the high end, the low end. Anything below the low end could be bad. Anything above the high end could be bad. That's why you have a safe zone. A deceleration is, the baby's heartbeat dropping. Your heartbeat dropping is not something. Your heartbeat slowing way down is not a good thing, and your heartbeat speeding up really fast is not a good thing. So don't spend all your time learning the difference between tachycardia and bradycardia. Well, you do need to know the medicine. I mean, I'm not going to kid you. You need to know the medicine, but you need to know it so that you can tell when you're being fibbed to by a defendant or an expert. But a deceleration, the baby's heartbeat dropping or slowing way down or speeding way up, that's the plain English that explains, how, what makes it bad, right? Why are they watching it? Because they want it to be in the safe zone and they want it to be beaten right. So spend some time thinking about the plain English definitions that anybody can understand. We all know what a heartbeat is. We all know what our heart does. We all know why we need a heartbeat. We all know that we don't want it to go too fast and we don't want it to go too slow. So they're keeping track of the baby's heartbeat. And if it gets too slow, or if it starts looking not uniform, not beating the same way, it's a signal, right? It's a sign. It's like the nurse who called the doctor. It's a warning. It's the baby's SOS. Having trouble down here. Somebody help me. I'm getting tired. I don't know how much longer I can last. It's the only form of communication that the baby has with the outside world. And it's important and they should pay attention to it. So, if you're going to do OB cases, think of it that way. Jurors don't love all the scientific words and medicine words, and if they do, they're probably against you anyway. But they don't like those words. They like to be able to understand things and not have to question them. But they love visuals. They love, they watch the medical shows. If you watch the medical shows, they can tell you what's going on with the patient in plain English, even though they might overlay it with some medical words. The doctor on one side of the bed says, well, he's got supraventricular, astigolopathy, and the doctor on the other side of the bed says, oh, okay, his heart's beating too fast or something. But they do that for us for a reason. Why? Because, we aren't going to watch those damn things if all they talk about is in, sciencey medicine-y words. They make it plain English. I've heard so many lawyers say after a loss at trial, well, the jury just didn't understand the medicine. No kidding. They aren't a bunch of doctors. They aren't a bunch of nurses. They haven't been to medical school. Most of them didn't want to go, so they don't need to understand the medicine. They need to understand you. They need to understand your case. Your case is not about the medicine. Remember, flashback to Justice Cardozo, your case is about the wrongful act. Why is the act wrongful? Because the eye of vigilance perceives danger. What is it about the act that somebody who's being careful would say, I don't know if I should do this. Somebody might get hurt. That's what your case is about. It's hard to keep that at the forefront of your mind, but it's absolutely necessary if you want to win. So, the one thing, we see in, with Keenan Law Firm, referring lawyer group, most everybody knows I manage the medical malpractice division. With the new lawyers coming in, that's the first thing. Oh, they want to learn that medicine and use those medical words and sound. Forget it. You're going to need it to talk to the expert, but you're going to make the expert say it in plain English. But you need to be able to understand when they try and bamboozle you. That's the real reason you need to know the medicine. But when you're learning it, you need to figure out how to translate it to plain English. That's what you need to do. Translate it to plain English. So let's take our example. I told Jen at the beginning of this, I don't know why these go an hour, and then when I get into it, I spin off on all these other things that I'm trying to. The benefit of doing my job, working with the referring lawyers, is I've seen all the things that have gone wrong, a lot of them anyway, and then my job is to teach and help so that those things don't happen again. So when I bring these things up, understand, I'm trying to prevent you guys from having the problem that somebody else had. So in any event, the back to our case example of a doctor not listening to the nurse's warning. So, what do you ask for in discovery? Well, you're going to want the hospital medical staff bylaws. You're going to want the hospital medical staff rules and regulations. Why are you asking for those? What are you going to do with them? Well, you want to see what it says about, they all start off saying, if you don't follow these rules and these regulations and these bylaws, you may get your privileges jerked. We're not going to let you practice here unless you follow these rules, basically, is what they say. And when you're looking at how do I prosecute a malpractice case, the first, patients expect that hospitals have rules written down that doctors and nurses and all staff must follow. And patients expect that you know, the providers in that hospital must follow those rules. And if they don't, the hospital, through oversight, is going to get rid of them or discipline them. You know, you either straighten up or you're out of here. So you're going to look through those and say, you're going to see, what do they say about patient care? What do they say about when a doctor should respond to a patient in need? You're going to see, what do they say about communication? What do they say about cooperation, about listening to others, you know, about putting the care of the patient, you know, the patient's well-being above everything else? What do they say about informed consent? You know, the doctor having to tell the patient, hey, you know, this is going on. Here's the options we have. Here's the risks of each one of those options. And here's the outcomes, the possible outcomes we're looking at. Well, if the doctor doesn't even come to the patient's bedside, they can't have that conversation. They don't have that conversation. So you want to see, you know, what all that requires of, what those rules require of the doctors. And then you want to get the policies, and you're going to have unit specific policies for labor and delivery. You're going to have to ask for those. They're not going to volunteer them to you. If it becomes an issue and they don't want to give all of them to you, then ask for the table of contents for the labor and delivery, you know, unit specific policies. Then you're going to want some general policies. What about the chain of command? You know, chain of command policy. When does that get invoked? What interventions, you know, nurses should be doing in labor and delivery? What do they have authority for, and what do they have to ask the doctor for? Those sorts of things. And then with the hospital, you're going to be wanting, you know, they will probably have somewhere that talks about their oversight role. And maybe it's in the nursing policies that say, if you don't follow these, then we're going to have to terminate you or discipline you or retrain you. But you can get that kind of stuff. That's moving in more probably to depositions, but you'll get that kind of stuff in your 30B6 deposition from your, you know, risk manager type person or CEO person. How do we know what needs to be in those? You know, you got to know the medicine, take on the doctors and figure out when they're fibbing and the experts. Well, you got to know when the hospital people are fibbing to you. Oh, we don't have any requirements that we do those sorts of things. Well, two places to look. One, get the Joint Commission's hospital standards for the year of your case, and you'll find what the Joint Commission requires for them. And number two, look to your state administrative codes. They usually have some pretty good language in there about what sort of things that hospitals and doctors need to do. Hospitals need to do for oversight. And it's going to talk about oversight, and it's going to talk about needing to ensure that the care of patients is, you know, good quality, that patients are safe. Yes, it talks about patient safety. And they need to monitor, and they keep track of those metrics. They do. They keep track of those things to make sure that patients are being treated right inside their hospital. So they do those things, and it's, you know, the governing body at the top of all this is the hospital. They decide not only what patients get in, they decide what doctors get in to treat there, and what nurses get in to treat there. So let's just go to the deposition stage, and then what are you going to do with, you know, we started back looking at, you know, what makes what about the defendant's conduct would be harmful to others. These policies and procedures, rules and regulations of the hospital, from a juror's standpoint, from a patient's standpoint, it's the best way to get a conviction on a hospital or a doctor or a nurse if they're not following the rules that were laid down beforehand, right? Same with the police department. If those cops out on the street don't follow the rules that they are governed by, that were written before they became a police officer at that department, if they don't follow those, they should be retrained, disciplined, and then fired. Those are the 3 steps: retrained, disciplined, and fired. It's the same for the hospital. If the nurses, if the techs, if the doctors aren't following the rules that are written for them, they should be retrained, disciplined, then fired. So you're going to ask these people, doctor, did you know about this, in the medical staff rules and regulations, this rule that says that you have to listen to nurses when they call with concerns? Never knew that. Well, were you given a copy of the medical staff rules and regulations when you were given privileges there? Maybe. You get those kind of answers. Did you get a copy of the rules and regulations for the year, that this little baby was injured? I don't remember. You'll get that kind of testimony. That ain't good for the bad guys. That's good for the good guys. Well, for the nurses, did you know about the policy? Well, the policies and procedures are on the computers and we can search the database whenever we want. Well, did you know about this one? What does it say? Did you understand it? Were you trained on it? Were you supervised to make sure you were doing it that way? Why did you not follow this policy here? Why did you not? You called this doctor 3 times. You charted 3 individual times that you'd called him. You got no new orders. You even charted what you asked permission to do, and that he refused. Did you know about the chain of command policy? Were you trained on it? Did you understand it? And then the big question, these are just simple questions. What's the purpose of the chain of command policy? Can't you restate your question? Sure. What's the chain of command policy designed to prevent? I don't know. Or they give it to you, and then what's the chain of command policy or whatever policy designed? Who's this policy designed to protect? And when they don't know that, you give them the words, you give them the answer. Mamas, unborn babies. That's what your case is about, not about the medicine-y, science-y stuff. And then you got their own policy and procedure. You're showing they didn't, what's your evidence? You show that they didn't follow it here. And then you get all this kind of stuff like, we have to use our judgment, blah, blah, blah. Well, then, the 2 best adjectives for judgment in a malpractice case are good and bad, okay? So you say, well, do you think that was good judgment or bad judgment? Because we all know the jury instruction in most of our states, and a lot of them that talk about, healthcare providers have to use their best judgment. Defense lawyers love to defend a case on judgment, but the instruction says they got to use their best judgment. So, doctor, tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if you want to make this a judgment case, You think that was good judgment or bad judgment to not respond to the nurse who was calling you with 3 times with these concerns and asking permission to do something that wouldn't have hurt this baby, but just would have given more accurate information on how the baby was doing? Because the readings, the SOS signal from the baby is kind of having trouble down here, running out of energy. I don't know how much longer I can last. And the power of the contractions, that shows up too on those strips. You can show, I think everybody at some degree is claustrophobic. So when you start talking about, the contraction, you think of a building caving in on you or something. It's not good. It's not good. We all know it's not good. We don't have to hear a lot of medicine-y, science-y crap to know it's not good. It's not good. When the walls close in on you and smash you and smush you, it's not good. We know that. You don't need experts to tell us that, other than the law says we need them to, get to the jury on. So what do you ask your experts? What do you ask the bad guys experts? You ask the bad guys expert, it's important for doctors to listen to nurses, true? You ask your expert, is it important for doctors to listen? Why? And, your expert can use the example of the pilot listening to air traffic control. Whatever the analogous system is, these things are important. Why? Because in this situation, it's life or death. It's important, for the cops to be trained, because in that situation as well, it's life or death. It's that important. So all these things are important. You can see how all this ties in. Everything I've talked about so far, it was starting from when you're evaluating your case. And we did it using, the criteria from Paul's graph, right? Sure we did. The other thing that kind of ties into the analogous system thing, it's hard for judges to understand this when you're making the argument, because what do the bad guys do? They want to keep all this evidence out, right? It's only about this case. It's only about, it's not, because this is the standard of care that applies in all cases, not just this one. It applies in all of them. The law is set up so that, we can't say, in just this one case, you should have done this. We can't do that. Our doctors, our experts have to get on the stand, and they have to say, well, the standard of care says you do this in all these situations. And, treating mamas and unborn babies. That's the standard of care. So, use the analogous system there. Let's go back to Cardozo. That Paul's graph opinion in law school, I hated that thing. I couldn't even read it. All those words he used were, and there I was, somebody trying to understand the law, first year torts. A valus. I didn't know what the hell a valus was. Go back and read it. See, look it up. Anyway. It's entertaining. These things are fun, right? So in the opinion, Justice Cardozo talks about driving fast, speeding, right? And he talks about in the circumstance on a raceway, speeding is what you do, right? Everybody does it. It's what's expected of you. You're supposed to speed to win. Speeding in, a crowded downtown area or in a school zone, no, it's a bad thing. it's the eye of vigilance would perceive danger to innocent people there. And careful people are going to not speed in those circumstances. So, a lot of us have the same or similar circumstances type language in our jury instructions in our law as well. That's what they're talking about. They're talking about what, the analogous systems. That's what Justice Cardozo was talking about. It gets lost. It gets lost, especially, sitting judges now have spent most or all of their career in the tort reform era. When all we hear is, from the opposition is how bad tort law is, but it's just an extension of the criminal law, and it just says that, hey, be careful so you don't hurt others. Personal responsibility, right? Personal responsibility means you be careful not to hurt others. It doesn't mean you have to keep your head on a swivel and look out for all the careless, reckless idiots out there. That's not how our society is. We expect careful behavior. So, anyway, so that's how you can tie analogous systems into Paul's graph. Use the speeding example. Go back and read it. Read that case to the judge next time you're making that argument at the hearing. And it'll open their eyes a little bit. They should remember Paul's graph, even if they never. The last time they had anything to do with torts is when they took their torts final. And then they went out and did what? Wills, or some other thing, and then now they're a judge, on a civil tort case. Oh boy. Don't ask me how to draft a will. I'm not gonna judge you, Judge, on how to draft a will. Anyway, I hope some judges watch to this point. I hope they watch to this point.
I hope so too. I find that convincing the judge, or I should say educating the judge, is the most important part in these cases, because they really give a lot of deference to the defense. And I think, at least in my experience, sometimes the defense knows that medicine, more than anything, because that's all they do. We may do some medical malpractice, we may do some car crash, we may do some employment, and we may, we know those things really well, but that is all they do. And they do it so well to protect their clients that the judge is like, I think that makes sense, versus the sometimes a little bit unconventional way we try cases. So it's important to bring it back to that Paul's graph, that very first thing, the basics, the universal truths, and that's something they can understand. Yeah,
you're exactly right. And, it works to get this evidence in. But why? Because it's relevant. It's probative. It makes the things at issue, things that aren't at issue, more or less true. It proves the things that need to be proven. Medical malpractice cases aren't about the science. They are about, did the healthcare provider act carefully or not?
And that helps too with explaining the standard of care, because some people will say, well, that standard of care doesn't apply to us because we're not a hospital, or that standard doesn't apply to me because I don't work in a particular facility, or that, well, guess what? It does apply to everybody. Sure. Don't hurt people.
Yeah. Why does it apply? Because it's what you do, to be careful. You're right. It protects patients and it prevents harm to them. Mm-hmm. That's the stuff that should be done. And another area, while we're talking about judge disconnects, that we need to be cognizant of, right? Because they don't do this every day. We do, and we see it a lot. But I see this a lot with judges is, they think, well, the experts tell us what the standard of care is. Well, the two experts have differing opinions. You know what? And it's just like putting up baby heart monitor strips with experts. They're going to all see something different, and they're going to all tell you a different standard of care. But the decider in these cases, according to our jury instructions, who Who's the decider? It ain't the expert. It ain't the judge. It ain't the defense lawyer. And it ain't us. It's the jury. They have to decide how a prudent doctor, a prudent hospital, careful hospital, reasonably careful doctor must act. That's what they have to decide. That's the first decision they have to make. And then they decide, well, how careful do they have to be? Were they that careful here? Yes or no? If they weren't that careful, then they go on to say, well, did their failure to be careful, as careful as they should be, is that what caused the injuries here? That's in a nutshell what the jury gets to decide. So anyway, I've gone. You were going to ask me some questions, right?
Well, I was.
Let me give some bottom lines first. All
right.
Know the medicine, but simplify it. Was it Albert Einstein, I think, that said genius is making the complex simple, which is what I always say Don Keenan is. Know the medicine, but know how to simplify it. Use plain English and make sure everybody can understand. And remember, the overarching, principle here is that no healthcare provider can gamble with a patient's life. I don't care who they are, and that's a Bubbaism that we all carry around with us. You can't gamble with my life. You can give me the choices and I can make the decision. I'll make the decision based upon how much risk I want to take versus, what I'm willing to, accept. But you don't get to gamble with my life. Never. They don't. So remember those things as bottom line concepts. And then if you've got any questions, since we recorded this early, I do want to say, if you watched this far in, God bless your souls, because I don't know if I would have made it. So thanks for watching this far. Jenna does a great job every week in putting these things together. It's way beyond the call of duty. She doesn't get paid for any of it. She does this just out of the goodness of her own heart, and we all, should thank her and appreciate what she does. We're glad to have her. Last thing, Medical Malpractice 2022, the seminar, the Keenan Trial Institute seminar. It's been, since we started it, our most popular, one of our most popular, well-attended seminars. This year, for the first time in 2 years, we're going to be live in the same room again in Atlanta. It is February 4th and 5th, a Friday and Saturday, in Atlanta, where many of us have gone for years for these kind of seminars. So I hope to see everybody there. We'd love to. I really can't wait to see all the old friends I've made over the years, see them face to face, and get to meet some new ones as well. So I hope everybody registers and comes to that. Jenna, take the wheel. I'm done.
You are done. And that's all we have time for today. And you did an awesome job of filling up every minute of it. So we got some excellent information, and we will put Gregg's contact information in the description below so that you can reach out to him directly with questions about OB malpractice cases, the EDGE system, and possibly becoming referring attorney with the Keenan Law Firm. So if you liked today's episode, please click that thumbs up button, and don't forget to subscribe and sign up for alerts so you don't miss the next one. Next week, we will be hearing from the one, the only Papa Don Keenan. This will be a special episode where I sit down with the legend himself and discuss the year in review and what we can all look forward to, including the medical malpractice seminar and several other exciting events in 2022. I can't wait to hear what Papa Don has to say, along with all of you. So have a wonderful weekend, a beautiful Christmas, and happy holidays. And I'll see you next time.